How do we ensure fair trade practices? How do we ensure good governance and inclusion of the very large number of informal sector waste pickers, aggregators in the value chains? And there is a good amount of good body of work which has already been done. So how do we now move to the next phase of the program where these things are just becoming common standards? How do we ensure that the competition between organizations is to provide higher quality of service, to compete on higher standards rather than just costs? And how do we ensure that there is visibility of secondary materials to OEMs? So if we are to go at the start the journey of circular economy, then we need to have very clear understanding of where are different waste materials, recycled content, where is it which recyclers have them, so that a circular economy could be created. And most importantly, how do we usher in the era of value added enforcement by the regulators, so that the system starts moving to a higher level of performance? We are achieving some level of performance, but how do we go beyond this? Now, this particular webinar is focused on digitization. And there is a whole range of data which gets generated during collection of products. So what kind of collection channels have been created? How is waste being collected? How is it being moved? What kind of risks are existing? How is what are the practices in dismantling, recycling? There are hundreds of data sets which are being generated. But in the present system, we are not able to have our decision-making system based on these data sets. So how do we better utilize these data sets so that we can enable a circular economy? So that's the purpose of the discussion today. And such a thing will really enable accountability, traceability, transparency in the whole value chain. We, Karo Sambhav, for example, have our own tech platform to do that. But there are multiple solutions all around in the market. But how do we harmonize these ideas? How do we enable and usher in higher productivity, much better solutions, is what the purpose of the seminar is. So with this, I'd like to invite my co-presenter, Lucia. Uh, Lucia is Deputy Director General at WEEE Forum, and she has played an instrumental role in the last decade or so in solving the problem at very large scale. So without wasting any more time, I'll invite Lucia to the table. And Lucia, over to you.
Thank you, Pranshu. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I will share my screen, and I hope that everything works well. And I may turn off my camera just to make sure that bandwidth is sufficient for the presentation. So, well, my presentation is quite brief. But we thought it would be interesting to share with you some of the learnings that we have compiled in the more than 20 years of experience that we have lived in Europe, and in particular focusing on how digitalization is helping us to monitor better the waste treatments and learn more about the processes and the waste that we are handling, in fact. Let me first tell you a bit about the background, so the history we come from. Around 20 years ago, the WEEE Directive was providing a baseline to all member states and a frame for the proper management of e-waste. This was important because it provides some harmonization to all member states. This is very important because it means that they were all playing with the same minimum rules. This directive is based on the polluter pays and the extended producer responsibility principle. That meant that producers have to join and set up producer responsibility organizations that we call PROs, and which are the members of the WEEE Forum. So this WEEE Directive, in fact, meant a new workload for governments and policymakers. And well, in practically all member states, this didn't mean an additional amount of resources for dealing with all this. It means that people in the government had to deal with more work, and they were still the same staff and the same resources in there. So PROs became an ally of the governments. And not only this, they supported innovation and research They collected data for authorities. They also were training the recycling industry for improving their management practices and so on. I must say, I'll give some credit to the Waste Framework Directive that was in place before the WEEE Directive and was helping European countries to set, for example, the collection points network and some basic waste legislation. So 20 years later, after the WEEE Directive was set in place, I can tell that there are more than 150 PROs operative in Europe. And that's because of the reporting requirements in the directive. Now the European Commission counts with a historic record of statistics that helps them analyze the progress and the effectiveness on the policies. Not only the European Commission, but also local authorities, regional authorities, and national authorities. And this information is crucial for them, not only to assess the progress and the efficiency of policies, but also to design strategies and targeted enforcement, which is critical. And now we are at the stage where they are even using these statistics to design strategies to be less dependent on critical materials and raw materials and make economy more circular. And this interest now has become even higher with, for example, the Ukrainian war. So I would like to share with you some of the learnings that we have learned, sometimes based on errors, during the implementation of the WEEE Directive. And one of the main learnings is about targets and harmonization. We learned that despite we being waste, it has a value. So it means that it's not really something people want to get rid of because it has an economic value. It's often managed by economic drivers only. So we found or we learned that recycling and recovery targets set in legislation were key to promote the monitoring of the recycling industry. So to learn what's happening there. And the requirements for proper depollution in the legislation, in fact, boosted and promoted the safe and environmentally friendly practices for recyclers. In fact, PROs proved to be an excellent facilitator because they are the ones that have setting contracts with recycling facilities, and they were the ones that let's say, had the leverage to require recycling facilities to have health and safety practices and environmentally friendly practices when they treated the waste. In all this, we could see that harmonization was key to avoid the generation of flows of waste to less strict jurisdictions and increase bad practices. Although I must say that we can see still some examples in Europe where member states have set stricter legislation compared to the WEEE Directive. One point, and I think that's in particular very useful for today's discussion, that we learn is that monitoring is key. So monitoring allows to check the progress and ensure the traceability of the waste. This is quite important because e-waste contains not only valuable materials, but also hazardous materials. And that costs money to treat them. So if we are not controlling this, often there are some what we call invisible or unofficial flows that digress or let's say divert hazardous substances to non-proper management practices. Monitor, hence, was supporting fair play for all the actors, and Monitor is providing useful data. And Monitor is now supported strongly by digitalization. Monitor is helping us to solve questions like, okay, is treatment efficient? How should I set the fees? Or is the pollution good enough? Am I creating any additional impacts or unhealthy practices for the workers? So I would like to share with you one of the tools that were developed by the WEEE Forum, because we realized that in different member states and even in different treatment operators, they were calculating the recycling and recovery rates in its own way. So there were like 20, 50 different times of calculating recycling and recovery rates. And because we needed to check compliance, because of the targets of the WEEE directive, we had to come up with a harmonized methodology for calculating recycling and recovery rates. And by this, we found an excellent opportunity to learn about the processes that were taking place at recycling facilities, the composition of the waste, the materials that were recovered, and those that had to go to landfill because they were hazardous or incinerated. So what it was decided in the end was to develop a tool, an online tool that would allow for a harmonized calculation of the recycling and recovery rates and help recyclers to monitor the flows of all the fractions arising from the treatment, as you can more or less see in this flow chart on the screen. And I must say that probably you are one of the first people in the world that can see a mock-up of the new tool that we are developing. So one of the key points when we developed this tool was to involve the recycling industry because they were going to be the main users of the tool. So PROs and the recycling industry were involved in the development of it. The tool, the methodology, is aligned with the Senelec treatment standard that provides minimum treatment requirements. So it can also be a tool supporting the implementation and of this standard in the member states where this is obligatory. And finally, the tool is also enabling fluid communication between the recyclers, then the PROs, and helps PROs prepare reports for informing the government about the recycling and recovery rates and the destination of the materials arising from the treatment. So in a nutshell, this tool helps you have an overview and a good picture of everything that's happening in the treatment facilities. And as I hinted minutes ago, we are preparing a new and user-friendly version that hopefully will be ready by next year. So we are very thankful to Pranshu that is following the development of this new tool, so we can get also their input to make sure that the tool is suitable for the Indian market as well. And well, that was all. I hope I didn't use too much of their time, Pranshu.
No,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucia. Thank you for this input. And one of the big challenges that we are facing today is the lack of harmonized data for decision making. So each and every PRO, while there is a common format, but the details in the format are really missing. So once, let's say a laptop is opened, what are the material fractions that will come out? What is treatable? What is not? What is the secondary material? Where is it going? So today there is no harmonized data sets, and which leads to a very difficult challenge for even regulatory bodies to look at these data sets and make decisions to figure out, is someone doing the right work? Is it efficient? Is it poor? Where are we missing? So thank you for raising this. And in a joint program that Karo Sambhav is running with GIZ, we are trying to look at the standardized data sets which are present in the rep tool. So we are already starting to see that can we use rep tool in an Indian scenario, and if yes, this could become a very good way of harmonizing data sets of India at a global level. So what Europe reports is the same what India reports is the same what any other market reports, which means there will be comparability, there will be possibilities of then having a global EPR solution which works. Thank you, Lucia. Over to you, Shripriya.
Thank you so much, Lucia, and for sharing some great insights when it comes to harmonization. And thanks, Pranshu, for actually sharing some kind of putting it from in relevance to the Indian context as well. So next, I would like to invite Mr. Ashish Tiwari, Secretary, Department of Environment, Forest and Climate Change at Government of Uttar Pradesh. He would be delivering the keynote address for this session. Mr. Ashish is the member of Indian Forest Service with more than 25 years of proven success spanning across policy and planning level positions, namely Secretary for Environment, Forest and Climate Change with the Government of Uttar Pradesh. He has been the member secretary with Uttar Pradesh Pollution Control Board, member secretary with UP State Climate Change Authority, Member Secretary, Uttar Pradesh Environment Impact Assessment Authority, and execution level positions as Protected Area Manager and Head of Forest at district levels in diverse biogeographic zones in the state of Uttar Pradesh. So, Mr. Ashish, over to you.
Thank you, Silvia, and good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Lucia, Pranshu. First of all, at the outset, I must congratulate Pranshu and Karo Sambhav team and all the partners who have organized this very important discussion. Like e-waste, out of all 5 wastes which we have under regulations in our country, is supposed to be the addressed, least addressed waste, because we will find something moving in the field of solid waste. We will find something moving in the field of plastic waste, maybe hazardous waste. But to e-waste, I think there is a long way to go. And definitely, but the situation is not like very you disappointing. I should not say it's a disappointing, because now many organizations, even governments, and even pollution control boards, etc., they are in fact have understood the importance of this particular regime of waste management. I would start with a particular problem from Uttar Pradesh only, when in the city of Muradabad, there was a illegal informal waste processing kind of a hub, and that became a very serious problem when it was found, and there was a litigation also, that 25,000 cubic meter of electronic waste processed black powder is on the banks and bed of Ramganga River. So there, in fact, when we tried to took out that waste, and we tried to dispose that waste properly as per the rules of hazardous waste management, then really we came across understanding the problem of informal sector of e-waste processing. The biggest challenge with e-waste processing is informal sector and illegal processing of electronic waste. As an administrator, I always say that when problem of non-compliance is 80%, then probably enforcement cannot do anything. When problem of non-compliance is 20%, then probably enforcement can yield some results. So in the field of e-waste, we need a four-pronged strategy. First of all, we need to address the informal sector. We need to handhold them. We need to formalize them. There has to be policy intervention in that regard. We very strongly feel, because when we went there and studied Muradabad case, the enforcement, the district magistrates and all, they did lot of enforcements, but we found that the illegal processing shifted from one place to another in the same locality. So this happens, it's not the solution that enforcement, we need to have a kind of a, you can say, e-waste processing zone created by government, and then probably we can rehabilitate all those illegal waste processors by hand holding them. Secondly, like we must have a very robust system of reporting and monitoring. See, in this world of, like, our next era is of metaverse, we cannot rely upon the physical monitoring system. Neither pollution control board has that much of a human resource, or nor the government has that much of a financial resource to provide that much of that large size battalions and troops. So I think then then again, there will be problems of Inspector Raj, etc. also. So I must say that we must have a very, very robust virtual monitoring system. Virtual monitoring system, not only for the sake of the data sets, creating data sets of waste collection, refurbishing, then processing, and then finally making it a closed loop. So that data set is required, and also we need a virtual data by which we can actually see whether the waste processing is as per norms or not. Because if electronic waste processing is not as per norms, it is more damaging than any other processing which creates air pollution. So we have found, I don't have any hesitation to say that we found some of the industries, they took authorization and consent to operate from us, but when we did on-ground verification, they were simply doing the paper processing. So the problem is like virtual monitoring problem is twofold. One is to actually see what they are doing, and secondly, the whole traceability of the waste. If supposing starting from the production, like I was discussing with my friend from GIZ just half an hour back, see, inventorization is a very, very challenging thing. If one inventory is done, it will take more than 1 year, and again then after 2 years it will become obsolete. So but as per the rules we have to do inventorization every year, but I would say that we should rely upon 80-20 principle, like we can standardize what kind of product creates how much of a waste. Then probably at the source only we can have some with some 10-20% confidence limit that how much waste we are creating in our country, right from the production side. So if we are having that data set with us that this much of waste is created in our country, in our state or in our district, then probably by way of the digital system, which like Pranshu and Karo Sambhav has conceptualized, I think then we can actually see that where our waste is going, how much waste is going in the informal sector. Then side by side, we must have very, very strong policy input, very strong policy input for making informal sector formalize. So that way, in fact, this whole issue of electronic waste can be addressed in future. Fourth strategy would be, of course, uh, there has to be a need of an integrated portal. Like you must have seen, IIT Kanpur is creating some kind of a e-market portal for e-wastes. Their aim is also to collect data sets by way of which the circular economy is can be achieved. Many states are doing their own kind of virtual system, portals, etc. But I strongly feel like we felt it with the case of biomedical waste management, that there has to be one unified portal for our country. And the more responsibility I am coming from state government, but I was wondering that what as a state government we can do, but creating lot many portals from one state to other and in many technological institutions will not serve the purpose. We must have a unified portal. I think recently CPCB and GIZ, they have done wonderful work on the plastic waste side. So that kind of a portal, unified portal can be created for our country. It should also have some kind of a like marketing, e-marketing mechanism also, because the data sets which are created through e-marketing portal actually gives you the idea that where your waste is going. So it has to be well knit, well integrated, and I think if we put our all stakeholders, top brains, maybe administrators, software engineers, and people like Pranshu and Lucia who have experience in the field, and one this system is designed, and then of course supported by a proper see, I'll cite a very small example that there is a mandate of obtaining e-waste authorization from Pollution Control Board and consent to establish, consent to operate. Supposing as a member secretary, I have given consent to operate for 2 years, and when he comes back, he will simply submit some report in some format. But do we should ask ourselves, do we really analyze that report? The Pranshu has rightly mentioned what kind of data is being filled in that report. These things are very much challenging. I think if we have an online system and all reports in public domain, then probably system will do its own responsibility. I think every report of waste processing, every report of waste traceability should be on public domain. We did the same thing with our consent management system. We simply put our file tracking system in public domain. Like if somebody applies for a consent, then how many days that file is with a particular officer, and when he has forwarded it or not. This was very much evident in public domain, and it made our system very clean and transparent. So we must have rightly, I noticed that in Pranshu's presentation, the transparency of all data is very important. So I think it's not very difficult. The only thing is we need to have one integrated, unified. I always say that having so many systems here and there would create problem for PIBOs also, would create problems for uh, waste refurbishers and processors also. We must have a unified portal, and I think we will request MOFCC and CPCB to take lead in that regard. And I think very many bilateral, multilateral organizations, civil society organizations, they are working in this field. Their collective wisdom will definitely create one such very robust kind of portal which will be very helpful in taking forward the changes in positive direction. With these words, I again congratulate Karo Sambhav team and partners. I think every time I see that you are very much worried about the e-waste management ecosystem, and I hope that further discussions, whatever you seek from a state pollution control board and environment, forest and climate change department from UP, we are always here because we should work collectively for this particular menace of e-waste. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you so much, Ashish ji. I think you have shared some brilliant points, and I absolutely loved the four-pronged approach. You have really given a true vision of how it should look like. We definitely have a great system in the forward supply chain, but the all the points that you shared properly stitches how the entire system should be closing the loop on, especially electronics and electrical waste. Thank you so much for that, sir. So with that, I would take your leave and we would proceed on to the panel discussion. So we have some phenomenal group of panelists coming up. So panelist one is Mr. Satish Sinha. Mr. Satish is the Associate Director at Toxics Links, a leading environmental group working on issues of waste and chemicals. He is an active campaigner and advocate for sustainable development and has been a part of drafting the Committee for Municipal Waste Rules 2016 for India. He has made significant contribution in developing and shaping the e-waste rules in the country and has also worked extensively on issues of biomedical wastes, like Mr. Ashish just pointed out. And Mr. Satish has supported the government of Goa as well to set up comprehensive waste management facility and the system in the state. Panelist 2 is Mr. Girish Chandra Arya. He's the environment engineer from Uttar Pradesh Pollution Control Board. Mr. Girish is a chemical engineer and he is a subject matter expert for extended producer responsibility in plastic waste management and has been working with Uttar Pradesh Pollution Control Board for the past 12 years. He has also been associated in the working of creation of the EPR portal. Panelist 3, we have Mr. Gautam Mehra, who is the Senior Advisor, Climate Change and Circular Economy with GIZ India. Mr. Gautam has worked closely with multiple stakeholders in the e-waste sector, starting with the informal sector about a decade ago, and has a rich experience of work that is done by the informal sectors as well as addressing the issues that they face. Working with EU GIZ sponsored Resource Efficiency Initiative, Mr. Gautam has been one of the key contributors to the development of strategy for resource efficiency and circular economy in the electrical and electronics equipment sector for the Niti Aayog. Now, the blueprint of this strategy is presently being implemented through the Prime Minister's Office and METI. And panelist 4 is our very own Pranshu Singhal. Pranshu has I would say has done quite a lot of work in this sector, and you definitely heard him. But I would want to introduce him in a formal way. He has recently been conferred as the Social Entrepreneur of the Year 2021 India, an award by Schwab Foundation, a sister organization of World Economic Forum, and Jubilant Bharat Foundation. He has worked as Director Digital Learning for Microsoft and as a Head Sustainability for Nokia. He's an Aspen Fellow, an Ashoka Fellow, a Chevening Fellow, and Aspire Circle Fellow. He has a Master's from IIIEE, Sweden. So I request all the panelists to please switch on their videos. And I am going to be the panel moderator. My name is Shripriya Sridharan, and I lead the Partnerships and Strategic Alliance here at Karo Sambhav. And circular economy is a subject of my choice, and I absolutely love finding solutions for this. So we begin the panel discussion. And my first question goes to Mr. Satish. So, see, it's been more than 2 decades for Toxic Links, and yours has been one of the first organizations to draw the attention to issues surrounding waste, especially electronics, biomedical, plastics, and hazardous. From 1998 to now, you may have witnessed a massive transformation in how triple E wastes have been managed. So, how do you envision its future in 2030? Like, since we are in this decade of action, and what are some roadblocks that need to be dealt with to create a well governed industry? Over to you, Mr. Satish.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And can you all hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
Can
You are
somebody?
very audible.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
Yes.
very much. Uh, Great listening to all my previous speakers, and they've laid out the ground very well. I think a lot of issues have already been covered and spoken about as to what are the challenges and what should be looking at. And especially my compliments to Member Secretary Uttar Pradesh for laying it out so well about a portal and a national portal for resolving some of these issues. Shripriya asked me what has changed in the last 20 years, how do I see it, and what do I envision? But I think the main focus of today's discussion is also about digitization and how it can help the whole process. I think that is what we are going to focus largely on. Well, in the last 20 years, if I am to recall or go back, I think there have been significant changes on this issue of electronic waste or on the all the kinds of waste, all the different sectors or categories of waste. There has been a significant change. We have moved ahead, and especially I think focus was also greatly enhanced after the 2014 Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, which came about. I think a lot has happened, especially on municipal waste, and it also covered electronic waste. So that was another great time when I think public awareness on waste issues really happened. But if you ask me today as to what is happening on the electronic waste sector in the last 20 years, it'll be hard for me to assimilate everything or to comprehend in one place and tell that this is the net outcome of what has happened. Because I think one important gap in the whole system is we don't have an information or a place where I can seek all this information from. There is no place where you will get to know what is the total amount of electronic waste which is being generated in this country, which we were looking forward to in even 2009, 10, 11, 12. Even today is very hard to say. There are estimates and they are very poorly calculated estimates. We don't know what is the material recovery which has happened in the last 2 years or 3 years. How many people have met the targets, who have not met the targets, what has happened to them. So I think these are all questions that are there in front of us. But if I go back and tell you about waste sector per se, data inadequacy is a very major problem across sectors and across countries. It is not been the best of, sectors where you find data. Secondly, informal sector non-inclusion also creates a challenge in having proper data sets because material flows are not channelized in the way that we are expecting it to be channelized. So that's another set of a problem that I'm trying to lay out. And I think Mr. Chaudhary, Ashish Tiwari also spoke about informal sector and what needs to be done. So these are the challenges which are there. And I think everyone has spoken about, harmonious, harmonized system for, calculation of rate of recovery and things like that. But the fact remains that so I think these are some of the challenges that we are there, and harmonized rate of recovery is a major issue that we have in the country at this point of time. We don't have a system for these kind of things. I guess that one of the things that we need to look at is about, if you talk about circular economy today or even for EPR, there are multiple players in EPR, multiple places where things are required to be monitored, required to be audited, required to be seen. I think we need to tackle a lot of gaps in this system. The third point that I like to make is about, even if we have a centralized data set, somebody requires to analyze it. Somebody requires to make it available to everyone. Even today, there are a lot of data which is available, but who's looking at this data? Even that inadequate data, is somebody churning it? Is somebody sharing it with other people? Is somebody asking it to be churned? Well, that we have inherited an opaque system, if permit me to say this very openly. We have created or been responsible for creation of an opaque system. We need to move away from this opacity. We need to build some amount of transparency. We are making great moves as far as circular economy is concerned. We need to see how this economy is going to move forward. And one of the biggest drivers for circular economy is transparency and data sets. If you don't have it, you just can't move ahead. If I tell you today, day post-COVID, the world post-COVID, can you imagine the long supply chains and what is happening to the world, material flows, how we are starved of material today? A semiconductor has put us all on the back foot across the world, and we don't know where we stand today. These are the challenges. And if you look at it strategically on all these fronts, you will require to take strategic decisions based upon significant, credible information. If you don't have credible data sets and information, nations will make mistakes. And these mistakes can be very detrimental to the progress of a country and a nation. And as I come back to this point about circular economy, one of the basic things that comes to my mind, that circular economy, if you ask me, is very material centric. It is material focused. The whole concept of circular economy is nothing but material. And for a developing economy, if you're talking about material and you don't have material flows and data sets for each part of the material flow, you are asking for a major catastrophe to happen. Unfortunately, for a developed country to have that kind of a data set, it can be easier and they can decouple this whole process from human resource. Unfortunately for us, human resource and material, they flow together. We need to make a bind between both of them. And that is the necessity of data sets. We need to actually think very closely when we're working. I've been part of the task force for even Pranshu was there on, electronic waste task force on circular economy. There are other kinds of task forces which are being set up and there are other kinds of, things. And this is where, when we talk about data sets and we're talking about circular economy, I think this issue of harmonized rate of recovery, all these get a bit streamlined. They will get a bit more upfronted and they will start finding solutions. So I think this is another point that I just wanted to bring up. Second thing that I just wanted to say about, people have talked about transparency. It also, may be permitted to say this, and I will take this liberty to say this. Our environmental governance system is a little compromised. We don't have a very robust environmental governance mechanism. With all this respect, central pollution control board, the state pollution control board, the environmental departments, other stakeholders who are available in this chain. But there are gaps in the system, there are inadequacies, there are capacity issues, there are resource issues. They are full of all these gaps. Now, what it can do, it can create a lot more hurdles. So we need to just look at, can we improve this through, you know, through a process flow and datas at each stage of this, through making it more transparent, making it more available to people, analysis, asking experts to analyze this data. This is another thing, that you have data, but you don't call for expertise. You have limited expertise. You have limited, anybody who has, they have a limitation of expertise. Why don't you open it up a little bit more? Ask for more kinds of information. So I'm just, these are some thought starters. I'm just putting it out. I may be a little digital platforms also, and when I said about little compromise, digital platforms also create transparency and accountability. They bring accountability into the system, and that's one of the key issues that we are lacking today. Why do we need accountability into the system, and how do we build this accountability? I would say that, what will data sets do? It also helps bring in revenues for the government. I don't know if governments ever knew that, how to get better revenues if you have better data sets, if you know what is happening across and why these kinds of material and where is it moving and how does government gain as far as revenue collection goes. I think these are important issues. I just wanted to say one last point, that because I think there are other speakers, I will not take more time than this. As far as circular economy is concerned, I think it's very important for us to understand what is, for at least some of the critical material that we are looking at, or some of those uh, very, very critical or rare metals or something like that, which is available with us today. What is our net capacity to have primary source, and what is the net production or recovery from secondary source? What is this kind of data do we need, and how much of efficiency do we need to build in systems to create those kind of drivers? I think these are some thoughts that I had about digitization and what digital platforms can do, other than just giving out data and bringing that. I think it also needs to bring in the issue about, which is not directly connected with informal sector, but I think this issue about informal sector has been long pending, and we haven't really spent time and clear thinking as to how do we bring them on board. We just talk about it, and they can play a very significant role. believe me when I am saying that I have been in this system for many, many years. And we all, most of us, when we discuss informally, also we know that they need to be included. At some point of time, the thought was, let them not be there because it is very hazardous. Yes, some of the processes are hazardous, but some are not. And we need to see where do we get them. So thank you very much for, these are my initial opening comments, and I would like to, if there are questions, then I'd like to take them on later. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Satish. I just loved your passion with which you just delivered all your points. And it actually, junoon aa gaya sun ke. And I really love that we, in circular economy, we talk about resource efficiency, but you actually brought a very good point about efficiency of the digital system in itself. Data se kya karenge? We need to kind of, analyze it and infer the right data from it. So, on that note, I would actually move on to the next question to Mr. Gautam Mehra. And I would like to ask him that as a bilateral agency, what are some key initiatives taken up by GIZ to enhance digitalization and waste management, which could also incorporate, we are talking about harmonized reporting systems and a lot more parameters come into it. But, sir, could you please shed some light on how can we really bring about this change and what are some learnings and insights from certain initiatives which you are already doing?
Thanks, Ripriya. Well, to start with, you already spoke, Mr. Tiwari already spoke about this particular piece that we are doing as far as the plastics waste management EPR piece is concerned, which we are doing with the CPCB. But over the years, in fact, within GIZ as well, just to try and ensure that the efficacy of our work with partners whom we work with at the state level or the national level, that is increased. There has been a lot of focus which has come on digitalization and projects which involve part of getting the partner to move in the digital space to be able to either monitor, audit the work that they're doing, or even for that matter, in terms of decision making, how we can kind of build up systems which would be harmonized in nature. So, to give you an example, there is a tool which was developed over the last couple of years with the Ministry of Housing Urban Affairs, where now ULBs will be able to actually design their own detailed project reports for what they want to do on solid waste management through data that they have already got access to. So if they're able to feed in the data, they'll be able to get a report which would be very standardized in nature in terms of the kind of decisions or options that they can possibly take when it comes to managing waste in their particular areas. Of course, this is something which has to improve further over a period of time. You start with a few sets of stakeholders, and then you keep increasing the number of stakeholders just to see where you go, because the more data, the more the complexity in the entire system. But in terms of coming up with solutions, those solutions can also incorporate different sets of demographic challenges which could possibly be existing in different areas across the country. And India is a large country, so we'll have to look at different sets of solutions to be able to cater to the problems that are very localized in nature in some cases, or maybe even at a macro level. But we have been working in this particular space with both central agencies, including the ministry, in terms of enhancing their monitoring and compliance capabilities and trying to bring in digital solutions which will help to build their capacities to be able to access more data, to be able to take decisions accordingly, and to try and understand how the system is working and how far the compliance to the rule is basically happening. But I guess over a period of time, the way it has been moving, we are moving into more micro initiatives as far as the digital piece is concerned, because that is something which helps us to see the system from a different lens as well. Because there is one way where you kind of see it top down and see what can be driven through data and the access to data which comes from digital platforms that you develop. But there is a lens which also needs to come from bottom up in order to understand what are the key issues which could be coming up at the micro level, which kind of have an influence in terms of the implementation of the policies which are basically designed at the macro level, but sometimes not implementable at the micro level. So those are the kind of things that we are trying to focus on, and I guess it's more about systemic challenges as well, in terms of how do we access these things, what kind of capacities that we have when it comes to governance at both the national as well as the state and local level. We have three-tier governance that way, but these kinds of capacities need to be enhanced in order to ensure that when it comes to local level governance, we have capacities to be able to collect data, analyze it, as Satish very rightly pointed out, and then be able to take decisions, because in order to ensure that you are able to understand systemic bottlenecks, they exist both at the macro and micro level. So data is a key driver, and of course in the digital space you can just ensure that access to data becomes one very cheap, because that is something which is key impediment to getting access to a lot of data to take decisions. Digital just ensures that it makes it really cheap to access that. And secondly, you have different kinds of technologies and the advancement of it. Someone just wrote in the chat, can we use blockchain? Of course we can use blockchain. Just ensures that the veracity of data, if you use blockchain, gives you sufficient confidence in the data that you're collecting. But along with that, you get data to learn by itself. So machine learning, artificial intelligence, all of these need to be incorporated, possibly going ahead in terms of digital platforms that get developed, so that decision making, so that the analysis of data, it kind of is moved to a much higher level than it is right now, so that you can understand how compliance is happening, you can take your calls in terms of the policy instruments, the changes that possibly need to be taken up. How do you frame such guidelines which will help to implement or prepare scenarios for implementation of rules and guidelines that you prepare? That requires some time, maybe as you said, to 2030 will possibly reach there by that particular point of time, but yeah, a very long road ahead.
Indeed, a very long road ahead. But thank you so much for sharing your insights, Mr. Gautam. I would like to pass on the next question to Mr. Girish Arya. So I wanted to ask you, sir, that Mr. Ashish Tiwari also mentioned about this, that UPPCB is now creating this EPR portal for plastics. How it is more like an extension of the centralized EPR system that has been created. So could you share with us some key challenges that such a portal would solve for the state? Over to you, Mr. Girish.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me, and I would like to congratulate Karo Sambhav what they are doing since last few years for e-waste management. As I am looking for the plastic waste management for last 4 to 5 years, and we have observed too many challenges for the EPR compliances, for plastic waste management rules provisions compliances. The basic and the most complicated question or the hurdle which we have found is the mechanism, the channelization of that waste from the source to the disposal facility. As Karo Sambhav is also doing for e-waste management, they must be observing the challenge of collection mechanism, their disposal mechanism. I mean, who will verify the collection mechanism? That is the major question in front of us. For that, we as a state pollution control board, is in a way and are in maybe by the end of May of this year, we will launch this portal. In this portal, we have tried to channelize and we have tried to link each and every stakeholders from source to the final disposal of the waste. For that, in the last few years, what we have observed as a regulatory body in the plastic waste management, there are majorly 2 or 3 players which take initiatives for collection of that waste. First of all, the rag pickers, that if we can call them L1. So they collect the plastic waste in a very unorganized manner, and they just collect it and they segregate it at somewhere, which is obviously an informal sector. So they collect it and then they send it to some bigger kabadiwala or some other local vendors. So the bigger kabadiwala, we can say it is a L2 community, and then this L2 will give this waste, this segregated waste, which is also not that much of segregated or that much of kind of different plastics to L3, which again segregated, and then they send it to the trader. The trader is the major component who actually have what material any PRO, any recycler wants, whether they want PET, whether they want MLP, whether they want any valuable material, they will provide. So what we are trying here is in this EPR portal, we are connecting local bodies to our EPR portal, along with the recyclers, along with the PIPOs, along with the cement kiln factories. We are making them in one platform and trying to make a chain for to visualize or to see from where the waste is coming, who is verifying it, and where the waste is gone, and what has happened to that recycled waste or what has happened to the non-recyclable waste. So this is there in this EPR portal, we are trying to make a full transportation and disposal of that particular waste, whether it is in MLP, whether it is a PET bottle, whether it is a polystyrene, whether it is a non-recyclable material. So what is the ultimate disposal which is being done by the recyclers is what we are trying to do. So in this EPR portal, we have also have made a provision to submit their certificates or submit their agreements with ULB, submit their certificates to the recyclers, so that the what quantity of waste they are lifting, what quantity of waste they are recycling, that will be shown in one platform. And this dashboard, in this dashboard, what we will provide is ULB wise or district wise data related to the generated plastic waste and what has happened to that much of quantum of that plastic and waste, and what amount of plastic waste is remaining in that particular district or local body. At present, what problem we are facing from local bodies is that they actually don't know what is the quantum of plastic waste is there at their local body or at their district. So the trader, who is the major component, or the L1, L2, L3, whatever they will see fit for their data management, they will take it from data from them and they will provide us what is the quantum of plastic waste which is there in in their district, and how much waste has been lifted through PRO, through recyclers, or through any agency, or what amount of waste has been disposed by them also. So from this portal, we are trying to channelize the waste. We are trying to harmonize in a kind of harmonizing the data, and also we are trying to link each and every stakeholders which are playing an important role in the field of plastic waste management in a single platform, so that we will have a total quantum of waste and disposed waste. And then in future, we will also try to link this APR portal to the portal which is being developed, which is developed by Central Pollution Control Board and MOFMCC. So this is what we are trying to do. And we have also in the field of hazardous waste, we have also trying to make online portal for the TSDS, for the disposal facilities of hazardous waste management, for their transportation and for their channelization. And in near future, in the next 1 year or so, by the end of this year, we are also trying to make an portal for e-waste management also, where we will engage the PROs and the recyclers of e-waste management in the state of Uttar Pradesh. So this is what we are trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Girish, for sharing the work you've been doing, your team has been doing. And I think I'm really glad that you brought up the point about blind spots, and that is definitely there. So on that note, I would like to pass on the question to Pranshu. Pranshu, one impromptu question that definitely comes up is, what are the ways we can address the blind spot? And also, as an enhancement to that question, what are the spaces where digitalization can really help when it comes to the implementation on ground? Yeah.
Sure. Sure. Thank you, Shripriya. And I think Ashish Tiwari ji and Satish ji have very well addressed this. So really, really good conversation today. I think जो मेरे को लगता है the biggest issue is fair play. Fair play, accountability is critical to circular waste streams, to ensure that things go circular. Today, on public domain, there are declarations that India has collected and recycled over a few lakh tons of electronic waste. Now, if that has really happened, where are the data sets on secondary material? Like, where did the secondary material go? And we are talking of multiple materials here. So what is very critical is today this data is being captured somewhere, but probably not in a format which is harmonized, not in a format which is readable, machine readable, I am saying. So it may be submitted in hard copy documents, which, and then we end up talking about thousands of pages of such data, which no one can really make sense of. No one. I mean, it's there are issues like Ashish Tiwari ji said, of manpower, of finances. So how do you manage this? What is super critical is how do we come up with this very clear but deep data sets? And I'm using the word deep very consciously, because if we keep on asking frivolous questions like just limited to आपने collection कितना करा and आपने recycle कितना करा, तो हमें कोई कुछ पता ही नहीं चलेगा. People will say X and people will say Y. But we need to understand where did this come from. The same point जो अभी मेरे से पहले speaker गिरीश जी जो बात कर रहे थे कि we need to verify collection systems. Where is this waste coming from? What are those sources? And then second is, if this has been collected and it has been passed to the authorized recyclers, have they really recycled it? या ये वापस market में चला गया? So, and if it has been recycled, then वो secondary materials जो निकले, क्या हम उसका database बना सकते हैं? Because then we can tomorrow come up with a policy which suggests, or at least guides development of a circular economy. Because now we know इतने हमारे पास secondary aluminium है, इतना हमारे पास secondary tin है, इतना हमारे पास secondary lead है, इतना हमारे पास secondary rare earth है. Fortunately, today I'm sitting at CMET, where a lot of this work is happening. But the big point is, ये data sets ही नहीं है. So if for a manufacturing company or a OEM, they want to go circular in India, where do they source this material from? We need reliable forecasted data for action to happen. And that today is very difficult because ये data ही नहीं है. So, so one is, EPR is a huge connection to circular economy. Without good collection systems, we will never be able to get reliable data sets which tell us to or give confidence to any industry or any original equipment manufacturer to base and take a circular pathway. Because how do you make something when okay, there is a figure out there that, X lakhs ton of e-waste was recycled, but कहाँ गया किसी को नहीं पता. Like Satish ji also mentioned, like so many things have happened, but this data is not out there. And then so the first point is fair play. Second is accountability. How do we put accountability back on the table? By bringing transparency to everything. So if there are people who have been authorized, whether it is PROs, whether it is recyclers, how do we ensure they are accountable? Today, for example, when we talk of PROs, there is no penal provision for a PRO. I mean, there is no accountability given to it. I mean, producers are accountable for everything. Why? Why are PROs not accountable? Recyclers have been given authorization and they report certain data, but how many times is someone checking those data sets? And again, it is just impossible because it is not digitized. And it is not done in a format that is harmonized. It is not managed in a way that वो data बात कर सके. We also need to look at and consider the system. We are a part of a global economy in electronics. India alone is a part of the large supply chain. I mean, this is one of the markets for any large brand. This is not the only market. So we need to generate data sets which are comparable for any country, whether it is in terms of technical specifications. And that can only be done if we start digitizing, if we start going deep on what is being collected, what is being recycled, what is the amount of secondary materials that is available for anyone to go circular. So and then, like, Satish ji said, Ashish ji said, it's also about ability to analyze this data. Maybe we don't have the competence, that competence, because this requires unique knowledge. Not all that knowledge can be built in pollution control boards. Not one institution may never have that knowledge. So how do we collectively solve this problem? क्या हम ये सारा का सारा database public domain में डाल सकते हैं? Because once it goes to public domain, then people may be outside the country, inside the company, researchers, students, master students, they may want to do thesis on these things and they may want to publish papers. They may want to give great insights. So how do we open that? आज की डेट में सिस्टम का लिमिटेशन है कि वो सिस्टम में डेटा सिर्फ 3 लोगों के पास है. And if they don't have time, the whole opportunity of India is getting lost. So how do we open those data sets, invite participation by anyone to analyze and build, like, and this is the whole idea around open platforms, allow everyone to innovate. So if we don't put these data sets on public domain, what's the benefit? Why did we even digitize it? That would be the second point. But the first thing is standardize the data sets, look at, force everyone to actually report those data sets, put that data in public domain, enable circular economy. So for me, that is where we are standing.
Thank you so much, Pranshu, for re-emphasizing on certain important points about even getting that deep data, fair play, and accountability. And you kind of stitched it together quite well. Now, I would like to take questions from our audience. And one question that has come up is it possible for a recycler to sell secondary materials as a substitute to the virgin counterparts to OEMs? I would request among the panelists, in case Mr. Satish ji, Gautam Mehra, Pranshu, Girish ji, any one of you would like to answer? Yeah.
I can share something about this. I think the answer is a big yes. A lot of global corporations today have, mandates or even global commitments to use recycled content. However, ये recycled content कहाँ है, कितना है, किस quality का है, there is no data set, because the only thing a recycler is reporting today is मैंने 5,000 tons e-waste recycle कर दिया. उसमें ये भी नहीं होता कि मैंने keyboard करा या ये करा और उससे क्या निकला. So until unless we have that deep understanding, a manufacturer can't, suddenly say कि okay, I'm going to use recyclates basis some hypothetical analysis. So the answer is a big yes, but how do we reach that point and enable it is a different point.
No, I
Thank you,
completely agree
Pranshu.
with Pranshu. I completely agree with Pranshu. I think every manufacturer today, multinational or national, who is looking at this, they are contributing to, or they're wanting to become part of the circular economy. And the whole concept of circular economy is to close the loop. I think this closing the loop is extremely important, and they would love to do it. But there are questions, as Pranshu put it. How do you decide or make those benchmarks and quality assessments for material? I think that's the critical bit that we need to, that hump has to be crossed at some point of time. And I think that's the this thing. Even in plastics, if you're looking at, you want to close the loop, you want to go back to you want to replace the virgin material, you want to reduce the virgin material which is coming up. But then there are again questions. Will you use it for food grade? Will you not use for food grade? So I think these are, once you achieve that, maybe you can use it for food grade. You can achieve it for, packaging of your bottled water, or packaging of your this thing. So you could do multiple things which other nations are doing. So these are questions which are available. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We have another question coming up, which is really interesting. It says, how do we enable digitalization in the designing aspect of EPR? So if any of the panelists would like to answer this question. Mr. Gautam, Mr. Girish, Mr. Satish. Yeah.
Designing aspect.
Please.
Is it echoing? Designing aspect is also, when you talk about designing aspect, you talk about design for environment. You talk about EPR, and I think the question was right. I think when you talk about design for environment, you're talking about mass, volume, energy, all these questions that come up in that. So it's again question of how much is there going into it. When you talk about digitization, how much energy is required for doing this? How much energy is required for, how much water is required? How much of material can you reduce material content and still achieve the same efficiency? So again, these are all what is designed for environment that actually encompasses. So a lot of digitization can bring in efficiency into the system, and it can take you upstream into the design platform. So again, these are very, critical questions, and essentially all this is critical. I think this digitization is important for upstream, changes also. And these are places where these changes can perhaps be done. There will be better people to answer this, but this is what my initial response to this question is.
I'd like to add one thing here. And this is around, so along with GIZ, we have put in a facility for dismantling, to really understand the patterns, understand difficult fractions, figure out solutions to those fractions. So one of the fractions that is being worked on today is the various kinds of plastics that are today present in the electronic waste. And the plastics, even when we talk of keyboard plastics, different keyboards will have different types of plastics. Different eras of keyboards will have different types of, again, plastics. So it is, and if this plastic has to be reutilized, uh, there are technical specifications that it has to meet, for the new product. So a lot of those design issues are very closely linked with what is it that you are collecting, how are you processing it, how are you managing it, and those answers are fairly unknown. I mean, even very large, I won't name companies, but very large engineering, plastic companies who are trying to figure this out are struggling with reutilization of, and I'm saying not downcycling. I'm not saying convert e-waste plastic to a chair or a mug or a park bench. I'm saying, can I use a printer plastic to remake printer? So that is the level of discussion that we are doing. We're not talking downcycling, because otherwise with downcycling you will eventually reach a point where again you have to just bury it or burn it. So if we are to talk of good recycling, then these questions are today really open, and we don't know, we don't have these answers, and these are critical. And the biggest challenge is these data sets are not even known. I mean, I can only say from this, pilot program that we are doing with GIZ, we know these data sets, but if I were to talk of at a country level, we don't know these numbers because no one is reporting this. No one is even asking these questions.
Thank you, Pranchu. Mr. Gautam, you wanted to share some insights?
So there's another aspect which I think, and I've heard Pranchu, and we've had conversations about this as well. Now, where I think digitization can actually help in the entire implementation or design of an EPR program also relates to the fact that there is very little data which is available in the public domain in terms of the value of the material which is inside any particular product. So as the entire PRO regime, which came into being after the waste management rules, and you have different sets of players who started coming in with either very limited or no knowledge of EPR whatsoever, with the intention of just kind of making a quick buck, which is why we see a lot of these different issues which have come up in the entire domain. The fact that a material that you take up from any particular person, you collect it and then you channelize it to a recycler. Today, a large number of them don't know what is the value of the material which is inside the product, for one. Second, there is very limited standardization of data available for the kind of material or the, for example, as Pranshu rightly mentioned, different keyboards would have different kinds of plastics and each and every one would have a different rate to it. So how do we estimate the value of the particular material? Which is why there are people who are trying to estimate a particular service cost to EPR and then trying to ensure that they're able to do a good job for PIBOs. But then there are certain ones who have absolutely no idea about this particular thing. And in terms of just ensuring competitiveness can go down on the rate to any extent to ensure that they are able to make a quick buck. So digitization can actually bring in the transparency into the entire system, which will lead to implementation of EPR in a far robust way, because that is the intention with which it was made a part of the rule. But this is something which is not initiated as yet, but maybe if PIBOs probably become a little more transparent about the kind of material values can be estimated from there, which will help EPR to bring about the kind of results that we wanted to as far as environmental compliance is concerned.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for addressing these two questions. There are actually a few more interesting questions that have come up, but in the interest of time, we would have to conclude this
Shruti,
discussion. But yeah,
I'll just like to add something to what Gautam said.
sure.
So, Gautam, the kind of data sets that are required are available, but if we do not create, and I think this is the whole essence of the discussion today which is coming out, if we do not design those formats, if we do not put out कि कीबोर्ड खोलोगे तो ये डेटा चाहिए, यहाँ से उठाओगे तो ये डेटा चाहिए, यहाँ भेजोगे तो ये डेटा चाहिए, बिल्कुल standardized formats, and we have a great baseline from Europe, for example, because products are products. The good thing here is, a mobile phone of India is no different than a mobile phone of Europe. So if those product, at least RepTool today has allowed those data sets which are already being worked on by several recyclers across Europe, across the world now actually, then how do we build on those, standardize them and give it for everyone? And I seriously doubt this will happen voluntarily. Looking at the state in which we are, and we all know the tethered state of EPR. While we declare that we have recycled and collected 3 lakh, 4 lakh tons of electronic waste, the reality actually is very different. Everyone knows this, but no one knows this. So it's a very odd fact. मतलब पता सबको है कि असलियत में क्या हो रहा है, but कोई भी बात नहीं करता इसके बारे में openly. Yeah, सतीश जी करते हैं. At least there are few people who do talk. So let me not take that away. But it's an important point that we all need to address कि अगर सर्कुलर बनाना है तो उसके लिए ये डेटा तो देना ही पड़ेगा. And how do we ensure that PROs, recyclers start reporting them in the format? Because जब तक वो reporting नहीं होगी तब तक हमें पता ही नहीं चलेगा कि recycling हुआ, नहीं हुआ तो किस टेक्निकल स्पेसिफिकेशन के मटेरियल्स हैं और वो मटेरियल्स अवेलेबल हैं. अगर उनको री इंजीनियर करना है तो देन वी invite some research institutions to do that. But that will only start when the first step is taken, and that first step for me is a fourth step. It will only happen when policy is going to force organizations, even, and I'm saying including us, to put that data in with government and then by government in public domain.
Thank you. Thanks, Pranshu. I think your last statements have actually concluded the session, like summarized the session quite well. So thank you so much for that. And on that note, we have to end this panel discussion here today.
Satish, do you want to address something? It looked like you wanted to say something.
Beg your pardon.
Do you want to say something, Satish?
No, I was just listening to you and I was just trying to think about it. You know, one of the other problems that digitization can perhaps help from the answer that you made just now is about the kind of recycling facilities that we have had today. Unless we have benchmarks for material recovery, I think we are landing up in a very, very difficult situation. Everybody and anybody is a professional recycler who has been authorized, he has been inspected, due diligence process has been done, and he is recovering 20 metals, somebody is recovering 18 metals, somebody is recovering this. But if you don't have benchmarks for recovery, if you can't report as per the recovery, I think so it'll filter out a lot of elements when you have digitization in the process, or it'll help make these people become more accountable, improve facilities, take those kind of efforts to, to get there where they are required to be there. Also, my last point is also about reducing pollution loads. I think one of the essential requirements for this law was to safeguard environment. And I think that's something that we are not. Where is the hazardous elements going? How much have gone? Why this kind of product has not dealt with so much of hazardous components? I think these all get streamlined if you have a benchmarks and digital processes or digital reporting and an effective or a little more effective monitoring system. I think this will be great service to the nation. Actually, if I say so, it will be great help to nation both from the point of view of environment and material supplies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would ask again, do any of the panelists want to add some more points? If I have your consent, then I would move ahead. Are we good to go? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for really giving us so many insights. And I personally learned a lot from this discussion. Thank you for this opportunity. And I would like to thank all our speakers, Lucia, Mr. Ashish Tiwari, Satish ji, Gautam ji, Girish ji, and Pranshu. Thank you so much for enlightening us with a lot of insights. And we hope that these conversations kind of create a positive domino effect, and we are able to create a much higher impact and an exponential impact that we wish to see, at least what the country is trying to make commitments on. Let's see where it goes. And this webinar has actually been supported by our knowledge partners, GIZ India, WEEE Forum, and Uttar Pradesh Pollution Control Board. And special thanks to our principal sponsors, Apple, Dell Technologies, and HP Enterprise. So thanks again. Thank you all the attendees for making time for this. And we are actually appalled seeing the kind of response today. So thank you so much. And stay tuned. The series is not over. This is just episode 1. We are going to have more such episodes, and every month we are going to have one webinar each. So stay tuned, and since you all have registered with us, you're going to get all the further communications on your email ID. So thank you so much, and follow our posts and our content on all social media platforms. And feel free to send your queries. Some of the questions are not answered, but we will get back to you on that. So thanks again. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.